What I'm going to try to help you with today is some things you need to know when you're dealing with an insurance claim. I'm going to start off by explaining to you the difference between basic homeowners and basic commercial insurance. Most of these policies likely cover fire and liability. They likely also cover an airplane falling and hitting your house from the sky. It may cover hail, depending on the location. It may cover wind, depending on location. And if you have a power outage and you lose things in that building, it's only going to be covered if you have a physical loss on the premises. They don't cover power outages at all. It does not cover wind damage, especially here on the coast where we have our inland zones. It doesn't cover flood and probably doesn't cover mold. It's usually paid on what's called an ACV basis when your claim is paid, and I'll explain that to you in a few minutes. First thing I'd like to tell you a little bit about is something called windstorm insurance. I'm sure you're all familiar with. The way these policies are usually written, they cover direct damage by wind where an opening is created in the structure. Well, opening is a very broad term and it's currently being defined in many courts. It may cover damage without an opening if you have what's called a wind-driven rain endorsement. And by the way, I would suggest everybody who has a windstorm policy in this room, if you have one, go see Roy or somebody else and add this to your policy, okay? It usually covers replacement value made. It may cover your living expenses if you're displaced because it was uninhabitable due to wind. It may cover your contents. It does not cover storm surge, waves, flooding, and usually paid on a cash value basis. Sorry, I'm moving really fast. The time's limited. Flood insurance covers direct damage caused by flooding. Covers the mitigation cost to clean out the structure, may cover your contents if you have coverage. It does not cover any damage as a result of moisture, humidity, or resulting damages, usually. Other than a brief list of items, it does not cover anything underneath a post-firm elevated structure, okay, which I'll explain that term in just a minute. It doesn't cover damage from any other causal loss or consequential damage, the term you'll see in the policy. Usually, again, paid on what's called an ACV or cash value basis. Now I'm going to explain to you some terms you need to know if you're a policyholder dealing with an insurance claim. There's a term you're going to see, and you probably heard after if you had a claim, you dealt with this called RCV, replacement cost of value. This is the current replacement cost of an item, structure, or content based on the fair market value of replacing that thing with that item of like kind of quality today. The term I was referring to a few minutes ago, ACV. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Actual cash value. The replacement cost less depreciation based on the useful life of an item. So if you have an item that's $10, usually you'll be paid a depreciated amount depending on wear and tear, age, other factors like that. Next term you need to be very aware of is a little form called a proof of loss. You'll find this in every insurance policy, whether it's residential, commercial, Texas windstorm, it doesn't matter. There's a form in there called a proof of loss or a requirement that you follow one of these, and it's a legal form that's submitted by the insured, stating that many items, listing the items being claimed and the amount that they're claiming under their policy. This is a very critical form that has to be filed correctly and timely, depending on your policy and various state statutes. Have a professional talk to you about this before you do, if you have to do it. Okay, this is going to be a little silly and redundant, but building. I want you to understand what a building is when it's dealing with your insurance policy. This is the primary structure that's insured by the policy. Other structures on the property that are not attached are separate structures, or they call them other structures. Contents, things you have inside the structure which are not permanently attached to the structure. Other structures, if you have a detached garage and you have an insurance policy, that's what's called an other structure. It's not part of the main structure. Okay. This is a little briefing on who adjusters are and what roles they play in the process of an insurance claim. Staff adjuster. This is an employee who generally works full-time for the insurance company. Independent adjuster. This is an adjuster who many of you saw after Ike, who would come out on a subcontracted basis and adjust losses for the insurers. Public adjuster, which is what I do, is an adjuster who's licensed by the Department of Insurance to work strictly on the consumer side as their advocate. Contractor, restoration, remodeler, persons who are hired to do the actual work on your loss, but are prohibited from negotiating with the insurance company under Texas statutes. A few more terms you need to be really familiar with. Appraisal. And I'll read this to you real quick and expand just a little bit. Appraisal. A clause contained in most policies that allows either the insured or the insured to demand appraisal. to determine the amount of loss. They hire two independent parties. It's sort of like a binding arbitration, but a little less informal. If there's an unresolved dispute on the amount of loss, this can be a great tool for the consumer to quickly and efficiently and inexpensively get their loss resolved. Coinsurance. Something you need to be, again, very aware of. Most policies today have a coinsurance requirement, and most of them say that you're required to carry 80% of replacement value in your policy or suffer a penalty should you have a claim. Okay? Example, if you have a structure that would cost $100,000 to replace, and you have an 80% coinsurance requirement, you need to make sure you're carrying 80% or $80,000 of insurance, or you will be penalized when that claim occurs. Okay? Post-firm structure, I mentioned that earlier. You guys, unfortunately, I don't think there was a whole lot of flooding in Texas City, but this is something that you need to fully understand what this term means. A building substantially improved or built after December 31st, 1974 is a post-firm structure. FEMA created what are called FEMA information rate maps, and they use these to determine where flood zones were. After this was put into place, building codes were changed and implemented through city departments to tell you you've got to build higher out of the flood zone. Okay? Pre-firm structure. Any building built before this date. Now the reason these terms are very important for you as a consumer is if you have a structure that is older before this date and you have a flood and it's not been significantly altered or replaced, you probably have coverage for it. But lots of people, for example, in Bolivar, had an unpleasant surprise when they had added apartments underneath their houses that were built after this December date in 1974, and it was washed out, and the insurance adjuster said, "Sir, that's an improvement after the firm map. You can't do that." Guess what? No coverage. Okay. Also, there is a very short list. I'll have you know, when you have an elevated structure, if you do get a flood, there's a very short list of 17 items that are covered underneath that house. Okay? All right. Before the storm, before a claim, before problems, this is what I'm going to encourage you all to do. And I don't care what brand you buy, but I think everybody should have a waterproof case like a Pelican brand. Keep your vital documents locked in your house. You'd be surprised what happens to those if you have a fire, if you have a flood, if you have any loss event. You need to have those papers, because oftentimes you won't be able to find them later. Any major purchases or home improvements you made, you need to include that in that group. I highly suggest you go through your structure, cities as well, and photograph and videotape your entire structure now. Make a list of what you have. Keep a copy of that. Put it away in your box. Okay? Make a list of your contents. Put the dates down. Put how much you paid. Put this on paper and do it right now, because afterwards it's too late. If you have antiques, jewelry, collectibles, those need to be on a separate list. Most of you probably don't know it, but those are a separate item. They go on a separate rider, and they usually have very small limits in your policy. If guns, antiques, things like that, you need to have a separate policy for those. And then, whatever you do, keep your current insurance policies locked in this case with all your information. Okay? Steps to take right after you have a loss. This is line, fire, hurricane, flood, whatever you have. Photograph every square inch of that structure and your contents as they sit when you show up immediately. Don't dispose of any contents or any structure until the insurance company has an opportunity to inspect. Report the loss to your agent as well as the insurer at their address shown on the policy. Do this in writing. Take steps to protect any items that may be left undamaged. They're salvageable. Make sure they're protected. They don't get further damage. If you have eyewitnesses, meet them at the structure to verify your findings and note surrounding things around you. Make a note of the water line. If you're flooded, make a note of that water line in that structure, put a measuring tape on it, and take a picture of it as soon as you get back. Check for any penetrations in the outside, flying debris, exterior walls, roof. Note the relationship to the interior damages you saw. If possible, gather quotes for damage repairs that you are able to obtain prior to the adjuster arriving. That's really tough to do in a storm. You probably won't get it done, but I'm going to advise you to do that if you can. Okay? When the insurance adjuster arrives, ask the adjuster for the contact information, including their phone, fax, email, and address. You have to be able to communicate with this person. I have horror stories of clients who the adjuster came, they gave them original documents, gave them photographs, and the adjuster went back to Minnesota. Guess what happened to the pictures and photographs and the paperwork? It's gone. Never going to see it again. Confirm, only give copies. Confirm whether the adjuster is a staff adjuster or independent, and make sure they're licensed. Show the adjuster all of your concerns, walk the property with them, pointing out damages. If you provide photographs, as I said earlier, give them duplicates only, no originals. Do not give original documents to the insurance adjuster, copies, I mentioned that. Be very careful about expressing your opinion of how this damage occurred and what happened. Okay, this could come back without professional experts who can truly assess the damage, maybe like Marcus there. This could come back to bite you. Never sign a blank proof of loss. The form I mentioned earlier, I've had clients in the past who the flood adjuster said, just sign here, you can supplement, fill it in later. Don't ever do that. Get the number right before you fill it in. Be cooperative at all times and allow the insurance company complete access to the law to inspect the loss thoroughly. If the adjuster says you can dispose of any contents or altering the structure, make sure you have a witness to this or something in writing, email or otherwise that allows you to do this. You can go back and point to this. After the adjuster leaves, after each conversation with the adjuster, you need to keep a diary log of everything that occurred through that process. Okay? I'm going to tell you a little bit about what your duty is when you make a claim. 1, the insured is responsible for compiling, supporting, and asserting the claim for the loss. The insured is responsible for submitting a proof of loss correctly. In Texas, the insured is responsible for proving the cause of loss, believe it or not, being claimed on the damage of the property. The insured is responsible for proving ownership of items, making repairs in order to recover any depreciation that may have been withheld. The insured must cooperate with the investigation and sometimes allow inspections as many times as reasonably required by the insurer. The insured is responsible for proving the amount of damages and knowing and following the terms of their policy. Insurer's duties in the event of a claim. Upon notice, the insurer must investigate the loss promptly. Many of them have policies that say they'll be out there within 15 days or 30 days following the loss, with a little exception clause after that says, well, in the event of a declared catastrophe, we can take up to an additional 45, 60 days. That's in most policies. TWIA has that in their policy. The insurer must make payment for undisputed damages promptly. The insurer must place the insured's interest at a level that's at least equal to their own interests. They must act in good faith. They must respond to a proof of the loss if you follow one. If the insurer does not make payment in full for the amount being claimed, they must state in writing why they're not making that payment. The insurer must respond to newly discovered damages. Okay, move fast enough. Okay. Settling your claim. We're getting there. Never take, that's all we pay as an answer. If you have quotes that are higher, push the issue and state your case. Always make sure what you're claiming is supported by both a complete estimate as well as any engineering that may be needed to support what you're claiming. Provide all receipts for anything you've already incurred. If a meeting is planned at the site, try to agree on the claim, arrange to have experts and witnesses attend one meeting. That's my policy. Seek counsel prior to signing any releases for future payment. Save all your receipts for work you've completed so you can get your depreciation back if you were paid on an ACV basis.